So a quick note on the ballad etude is you always want to look for the most legato fingering, or the way that you can play the notes as connected as possible without letting them overlap. This is important for several reasons. I make a habit out of doing this most all the time when I'm fingering through a excerpt or etude for the first time. Usually I find that the most legato fingering will also lead to be the most I don't know, efficient fingering, and maybe the fingering that has most potential for speed in the long run. But also, especially in the ballad, you want these notes to really connect when they have and be expressive. So look at the first measure. I have the D and the A on the 5th fret. And notice what I can do there is when I go from the A to the G in the second measure, I can give it a little slide. It kind of is like a vocal ornament, you know, that you can kind of glissando through the. And you don't want to make it really nasty sounding, like. It still has to be kind of quick. It's just kind of like a little grace note, but it's a slide. Same thing here. It gives it a little more expression, makes it sound more tuneful, more song-like, more like a voice. That's what you want. And then on the last one, the final two measures of this part. See. I use the open A string because it set up the D that's coming in the 5th bar a little better. And the reason I did it and didn't use the fretted string is because well, you'll see the 5th measure is going to be a little more difficult, and we're going to use that open A string again, so it's going to make it more consistent of a fingering in the long run. Okay, measures 5 through 8 have several considerations. Even though they look like it's kind of easy to play, it's really a little more involved than that. Number one, you have several subdivisions. In the first measure alone, you have a triplet subdivision, followed by 8th note subdivision. So you have to really count triplet, triplet, 1 and 2 and 1, and really get that feel right. Look at the second measure. I've notated it a little different because I think you should practice it like this at first. You have 1. And what you want to do there is you want to go ahead and play the triplet that's tied over in the original part, because it'll allow you to really feel where that beat 2 is and not rush it. So you want to be subdividing triplets from the instant you get to the downbeat on that second bar. Triplet, triplet, 1. That way when you play it with the tie, you're like triplet, triplet, and you really feel the tempo even. Also notice on beat 3 and 4 of that second measure, I'm kind of lifting off the note on the 8th note to give it some of that 8th note feel to it. Listen. Triplet, triplet, 1 and 2 and That's a good stylistic thing, especially in this kind of ballad where you have this contrast between triplet sounds and 8th note sounds. That little lift off the note on beat 3 and 4 there in the second measure will really help bring out that contrast of styles. Measure 3. And 4. Nothing to that. I played those measures pretty long. I didn't break any of the rhythm. I kept all the notes real connected. The reason I did that is just because that's part of the form where it turns around. That's what you call a turnaround. They have all these chords that are, in relation in that last bar by fifth, So A is the fifth of D, and then D is the fifth of G, and then G is the fifth of C, and it rotates like that. So you want to leave that and let the harmony do all the work for the expressiveness in that, and not try to muddy it up or put something else in there. Okay, so now you come to the part in the music that you have to kind of comp out these walking bass lines. And to do that, you have to know what the harmony is in all these chords. My best advice to you there is to learn to play guitar, piano, or get a theory book and learn to arpeggiate these various arpeggios on your instrument. Learn some patterns for these arpeggios to get them in your ear, like a major 7 arpeggio would have 1, 3, 5, and 7 in the F major scale. If you want a minor 7 arpeggio like that D minor 7, you would make the 1, 3, 5, and 7 in a D minor. And then the same for G minor, 1, 3, 5, and 7 in G minor. Then C7, 1, 3, 5, and 7. And to do a dominant 7 chord, you have to use that flat 7, right? So you think about C major, but a B flat instead of a B natural, because it's a flat 7. And then the other chord you have to look at to know how to work with is this minor 7 flat 5 chord. That's exactly like it is. So you just would play like a minor 7 arpeggio, but you'd flat that 5th scale degree. So it'd be like E minor, but with a B flat instead of a B natural. So those are typically what you need to find. If you see a chord like 13 or 9, it typically just means think about it like it's a dominant 7 chord, like just a regular 7, like a major chord with a flat 7. And I think that's about it in this whole section. So here is my walking bass line I invented for this section. So one of the things you'll notice I did is I connected the roots of each chord. So notice I'm always playing on beat 1 or 3 where the chords start, the actual root of the chord. So like F, D, G, C, F, D, G, E, A, D. And the way I'm getting to those is I'm just simply walking in the scale that you got that chord from, one note closer to the root of the next one. Another tip is if you're going, if you're playing a 7 chord, like in bar, the second bar of this, like C7, you can use that beat 2 and go a half step above or below the next chord. So like I could have done something like F, E, D, then C, G flat, then F. I could have gone half step above, going to the next chord. That's called a tritone substitution. Something you should look up and research on your own, and more importantly, learn to play these arpeggios of these chords. They'll help you when it comes to figuring out how to walk from one chord to the next chord in a smooth kind of way. Okay, here's the second half of the walking bass part that you have to kind of come up with. On this D minor chord, to this D flat 7, to this F over C, so that means the F major chord with the C in the bass. Notice you have this kind of chromatic falling line that's like dum, dum, dum. And that's a real strong cliche in jazz music. If you look ahead in the Etude, he gives you a really neat line of getting to that. He does somewhere up there later in the Etude. So I went ahead and did that right here too, because it sounded like a smart idea. And then in the next bar, I went ahead and arpeggiated that F chord the same way to give it a little bit of repetition and some momentum. So it sounds. And notice also on that descending, that A flat, G, I'm using that, I'm pulling off of the note on the 8th note, on the upbeat. And it gives it a little style, a little pizzazz, and you know, it's really effective. And then on the last 2 bars, notice I'm going to go up in position. So I can get to the A on the 5th fret, because we're going to need to be up there to do the next 4 bars. Okay, so this next example is why I went ahead and shifted up in position to a 5th position in the last video. So what you want to see here is some smooth connected notes despite the shifting. That first measure is particularly difficult, because you have to go from that 6th fret all the way up to the 12th fret very smoothly. And the way you want to do that is always look ahead with your eyes where you're going to shift. Relax your arm so it just kind of drops with the gravity. That really helps. Think more about stopping the shift as opposed to moving your arm. Think about just kind of falling down and then putting on the brakes when you get there. Another thing too is when you get in those higher positions, you can use a little bit of vibrato to make the notes sound a little more expressive. So we'll go through the first 2 measures now. That's a little expressive slide I did there. You know, we've already done some of that a little bit in the piece. Just an extension of that, and it's actually written out this time. The other thing, look at the next 2 bars. You have and if you look at this and analyze it, you'll notice that all this example is just a bunch of arpeggios. Look at the first 2 beats. You have 1 and 3 of A major. After all, it's A major 7 chord. Then you have this B flat diminished arpeggio. But look at this. Those are notes straight out of a B flat diminished arpeggio, right? Then you have B, B7, B minor 7. It's a B minor arpeggio. Then you have E. There you go. And the same thing up here. F sharp minor. Then right here, it's a B minor 7 arpeggio. E, E. And notice that little, every 4 bars you have this little octave in the E. This is a really strong harmonic gesture. When you go, 5, 5, and back to 1 to where you're coming from. You hear this a lot, and it really helps center the key that you're in. So, we're in the key of A. So when we go 5, 5, 1, we're going the 5th note of A, E, E, A, and it really gives a strong, resolution like that. Okay, then the next bit, it's more of the same what we just did in a way, harmonically, but it transitions us back to the old key of F. It goes like this: 3, 4. A couple things to notice here. Number one is, my fingering choices are always trying to connect the notes. So right there, I'm always trying to use a different finger than the one I just used on the note before. It's right there from the E to the B. I used the 3rd finger for the E, so I'm going to use the 2nd finger for the B. You always have to do that. Look ahead 1 note and find that finger that you're about to use, and envision yourself using that finger before it's time to use that. That'll help you keep the coordination real smooth and the line real smooth along with it. It's kind of like that last measure. So right here, I'm already thinking about moving my 1st finger down to that 3rd fret. And then I'm using my 2nd finger right here for that note as opposed to my 1st. The reason is because the next note I'm going to play is an F. That way I don't have to play 2 notes in a row with my 1st finger and get a break like that. But I can connect them. Those little details are things that make the difference between, making all state and not making all state. You really want to take very special attention to your fingerings and try to get your sound as smooth as possible. So what we have here is a return to the A section, except now it's a little more ornamented, and as it should be. You don't want to play the same thing twice in a row, really. You just want to play close to the same thing. So here it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice a couple things there. When I shifted up to that F, I was very careful in the shift to be as legato as I could. Also, I used a little vibrato. And then right here, to play the G after the D, I went ahead and shifted my 4th finger down there to play it so I could set myself up for all the rest of the notes in the measure. You don't want to shift that 1st finger 2 notes in a row real in that low position. It's just a bad sound, and it will never get connected like that. So be very careful about your fingering. Okay, let's look at the rest of the Etude all at once here. Because what we have is another 4 bars and what we think is going to be the end, but then it has like a little surprise little tag to end the song. It's a nice ending. Let's look at those. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Get the lift here. You think it's going to go back to F, right? But no. It actually starts on the 4 here and cycles back around. And of course you'd want to put a retard there at the end, nothing just too ridiculous, but it's nice to know that you're going to end the tune as being part of being a musician. You have to finish the tune and let people know that it is ending and winding down. That last three measures, the figure there, is a very typical ending for something like this, and it's a great way to end a tune. But it doesn't really make sense unless you put in a retard and milk it a little bit. And you should treat it as that. So you should play from the beginning like it's about to end. So we think it's going to end right here. But no. Now is the real time to end it. And that's how it makes sense. So really, you have to think about it like if there's two endings almost. You have to think about, three measures from the end being what should have been the ending. So you want to slow down right before that on that last C, before the end. And then you want to go again and restart it. Then by the time you get to the C, it's the end for real. So you really want to give it some time and play the last note. Okay, use the following track as a kind of a guide to help you keep time and intonation and really listen for the connectivity. Try to get everything to blend in just right and be very expressive, and don't let too much gaps between the notes ruin the texture of this ballad etude. Really try your best to connect all the notes.